And we're live on LinkedIn. It's Craig Fisher with Annie Hammer, and we are talking today about empathy meets automation, holiday hiring hacks for restaurants, retail, hospitality. And really, these are hacks for everyday hiring, basically for any kind of business. But our focus is going to be a little bit centered around that. Annie, happy holidays. How are you?
I am good, Craig, and happy holidays to you and everyone else. I
Thank
can't
you.
say I've shown up to many calls in a holiday tree sweater, but went for it today and tried to embrace the holiday spirit. So, looking forward to it.
You do. You look very festive. Um, I've got my cocoa. It's really water, but close enough.
No one would know. You wouldn't even have to tell us that.
That's right. So Annie, we are loosely basing today's podcast on a an article you wrote called "Human Centered Hiring." Um, and why don't you start by telling us a little bit about you, and then tell us about what inspired that article.
Yeah, definitely. So, hello everyone. Annie Hammer. I'm responsible for our retail, hospitality, and consumer sector at AMS. And maybe before I talk about that, I should talk a little bit about AMS and who we are too, just so everyone knows. AMS is a global talent acquisition and workforce solutions company. There is a good chance that many of you joining us or watching the recording afterwards may have no idea who AMS is, which is a bit by design. We deliver hiring and talent consulting on behalf of many of the world's largest brands across 120 countries, hiring 300,000 people with over 8,000 people in our organization, and all done under our clients' brands and as an extension of their TA team, combined with our talent consultants that support organizations in talent strategy and employer brand, DEI, and tech deployment. So it's a bit about AMS because we're frequently not known because we are operating under our client brands. Me personally, I've spent the last 15 years in talent technology and hiring and had the privilege of working with some of the world's most iconic brands as they evolve their talent strategy. I'm personally really passionate about frontline and volume hiring with digital enabled experiences that are focused on making, really an overall positive difference in individual lives. And I think, Craig, while you and I have definitely had some different experiences, I know when we've talked in the past, we also have a lot of synergies in our career journeys and maybe even get excited about some of the same things in life.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. So yes, Annie and I have both sort of done the internal, external staffing world and beyond dance for several years. We're both very product and tech focused and forward thinking. And I think that you and I like to think outside the box a lot. And so today will be fun for our audience. All right. So tell me a little more about your blog posts
Yeah,
and where we're going with this.
yeah, definitely. So, when I think about a lot of the conversations that I'm having with clients and organizations and TA leaders, it's a lot about, what tools should I use? How can I use technology? What will my teams do if I introduce this technology? What do I need to be thinking about? And everything from, do I even need a TA team to I'm nervous about this and not really looking, not necessarily, I want to embrace it and I want to be forward thinking, but I'm also concerned about how I'm going to get this through internally when it comes to thinking about technology. And so, for me, I am a person that believes very heavily in being kind and keeping the human element in any type of decisions people are making or things that people are going through in life. And I think we all have our own stories and our own situations that people are going through, and you may not know it. And I think that also applies when we're thinking about hiring. And I think there's a lot of exciting technologies out there, things that are going to really change how talent acquisition is delivered. And so for me, when I was thinking about writing this most recent one and some of my other posts about this, it was thinking about, how do you kind of have that right balance of human and technology, because the technology can do so much, but it can't do it all. And at the end of the day, individuals and workers, employees, you're making a decision that's going to impact your life. And so therefore, there's still a need for that right balance of technology. And so, what I was trying to convey is, gosh, we still have, despite the technology, we still have a lot of challenges. And getting people into work, these frontline roles, and getting people to stay in the roles, and how they're attracted in is all really a big part of that.
So, yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned getting people to stay in the roles. And I think one of the things where technology has the potential to do us a really good service with automation and mass communication is the engagement piece that we have with employees. Sometimes we tend to set it and forget it, right? Somebody applies to a job, we schedule them for an interview, we tell them you're hired, you can start week after next, come in for training on Wednesday. But they've already also applied to 20 other jobs and maybe getting similar communication. And where we could probably be better is to kind of constantly be giving them more buying signals. So we're really excited. Here's what you need to prepare for. Here's what you should wear. And, SMS communication probably is the best way for that for hourly workers, or some sort of in-app communication to their phone. And then after they're hired, right? Same thing. Let's keep them engaged. Let's talk to them about how's it going? What are best practices? What should you look out for? How to make friends? How to, right? All these tips for kind of everyday life, just like we would as an employer write to potential, job applicants about things that would help them in their careers. Why aren't we doing this with our internal people?
Yeah. And I think a lot of that too is, we talk about the tools and how they work, and they have the capability to do some of that and have that engagement and tell the stories and make this connection. But it actually does take work to make sure you have that right content, you have the right touch points, you almost then go through that experience from internal employee or from external candidate and verify, like, what does that experience feel like? How is it working? What information am I getting? It actually takes quite a bit of work to feed the engine, if you will, of the right content, the right brand, the right touch point, Craig, you're going to be working with Annie in the next 2 weeks, and here's what it's like to be on the floor stocking shelves with her. And those types of pieces of information could be really valuable, but it actually takes work and the orchestration to feed that, to then have the technology deliver it. And so I think sometimes, maybe we don't have the right roles in place to do that. Maybe we're not
Mhm.
thinking about it that way. We're too busy still processing, and, some cases for some clients still working on spreadsheets and such.
Right.
And so you're not necessarily feeding the engine that can then deliver that experience.
So it's interesting that you say that, because yes, it does take a dedicated person or team to do something like that when you're talking about volume, right? Certainly of employees. And most, let's say, restaurant groups are small teams,
Hmm.
right? And a lot of retail groups are small teams, and so they don't have a person for this. And you've probably seen this. I know you've seen this in the past, because AMS has a sort of tip of the spear services group that does employer branding and things like that, like we did at Allegis. And um, you repurpose a recruiter or a coordinator for these things, that someone that understands what the struggle it is to get people in the door in the first place.
Yeah.
And then, you know, that way easier to understand what it takes to keep them and keep them engaged and happy.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of think about them as, there's different titles you can call them, but brand ambassadors or brand strategists, and they're your storytellers,
Right.
and they deeply understand, to your point, the personas. They might understand the local nuances, because even if you understand the brand, you may not understand what that experience is like, or what the population is going to be somewhere in Kansas versus New York.
Right.
And being able to focus on that EVP and how that content then materializes, What are you listening for? How are you doing things like social listening and ensuring that content management system is populated? But some of the best consultants I've had on my teams are the ones that have been recruiters that have then become into these more specialized or SME roles because, to your point, they understand, they get it, and they've got the pragmatic kind of operational lens of how is this going to work and what will I do to make it work, because at the end of the day they understand the outcome that needs to happen, which is getting those people engaged, giving the right information, and having them show up and be happy about doing their job.
Right. You make a great point. I think another potential type of person for that role is someone who's done the job, right? And so let's say that you're hiring someone who has done, a service in a restaurant. What does it cost to convert them from that job where they're getting a kind of a low salary but tips, and is it between 35 and 85K? And do you want to do that regionally so that they know that area, right? And so your cost starts to add up a little bit, but then what's the cost of turnover? So there's a formula there, certainly, where there's a better outcome, I think, just by engaging people, and that promotes internal mobility as well.
Yeah, it does, absolutely. And I think just from a job satisfaction perspective, then you're talking to someone that, to your point, has done that job, whether it's someone that's been on the retail floor or they have been at the front desk at the hotel, and now they're getting to explain what that role is to an individual, or build the content that's going to explain that role. And we've had a lot of success with doing just that, or looking for individuals that they didn't come from recruitment, or I've got a member of the team now that was a store manager at a retailer, and then came into recruitment, is now running a large team of specialists that are just doing this, and they understand it more than anything because they know that, gosh, what it's going to take to hire individuals that are coming at 4 a.m. to restock shelves, and what type of persona that is, and what I need to say, what I need to make sure is really clear to that individual.
So yeah, that's sort of the big box model, right? I did a project, rebrand for Best Buy years ago, and all of their HR and recruiting team came from the stores. They were store managers, they were field people, and then they come to the home office and do that job. Back then, we didn't have a good enough methodology for training them for that next role. I think we've come a long way, for that. And it's the right model. But what has happened also in the past and currently, I think, is that we put a lot of that responsibility on the store manager or the desk manager at, in hospitality, or whatever that is. The person that's hiring for that role then is responsible for doing all that other stuff, and we don't give them a shared service or a resource for that.
Yeah, agree. It's actually interesting. I was at a retailer over the weekend, or at a store, and I was checking out. They didn't have self-checkout yet, so they had individuals there. And I was talking to the cashier, the lady at the desk, and there was the store manager, presumably, or the team lead that was behind her, and she had answered the phone, and she exchanged pleasantries, and then she said, I'm really sorry we haven't gotten back to you, but we're short-staffed. It's our busy season, and we haven't been able to open interview times or decide who we'll extend offers to." So clearly she was speaking to a candidate, but in that situation, I'm thinking she's just led with her challenge of, I'm short-staffed, we're really busy, so therefore we don't have time to actually talk to you as a candidate. And actually that candidate could be part of the solution, but because we've put that weight on that manager or that team lead at the store, they've got tons of other things to do. They've got to make sure the shelves are clean and that they've got the right schedules on for the staff they do have, and trying to sort of just band-aid through. And realistically, if they would have had someone that's just focusing on that experience and having that quick conversation and getting that offer out, that wouldn't need to sit with the store manager or that team lead, and they could actually have 5 new employees coming in to solve this short staff problem.
It's funny how, you know, those of us who've worked in the role that we're in for some of these retailers and restaurants and hospitality chains notice these things, right? And want to lean in and engage with it. I got to do a project a couple of years ago for Accenture. They had taken over hiring for restaurant. I'm sorry, for warehouse, and then we got retail from it for Ross Dress for Less.
Yeah.
And I'm a huge Ross Dress for Less nerd, and I like to go. They call it treasure hunting, where you go
Hmm.
right see what's in the store. But I got to actually go to these retail stores and act as if I was going to try to apply to a job. And so I would walk in and say, "Hey, I want to apply for a job," and they'd look at me like I'm crazy. But uh, I'd say, "So, uh, where does the person sit who interviews people?" Well,
Hmm.
she had to go out. She had to go to Staples or Office Depot or something for some supplies, or I think she went out to smoke or whatever,
Hmm.
whatever
Yeah.
the reason was. And I'm like, all right, something's not quite
Hmm.
clicking here. You've got this big sign in the window that says, "We're hiring. Come talk to us," and no way to engage with people. And so that was something that we had to fix. And sometimes it takes that kind of boots on the ground mentality to see, oh, there's a real.
A challenge here.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what do you think is the current state of hiring in these types of organizations, especially during the holiday season? Is it chaos, or are we in a good place?
Yeah, I think definitely dependent on the organization and sort of how much some organizations sort of took the opportunity during COVID, post COVID, to make some changes to their processes, their technology, or they're still doing it. And so they're in a, a little bit better spot where they've got the tools to be able to enable the experience, but there's still challenges with people getting stuck, people not getting there to do those couple touch points, to people thinking that maybe I've enabled this technology so much that it's a scam. So we kind of got that spectrum, which is
Yeah.
technology's, there, it's running, it's great, to the other extreme that um, spreadsheets and manual files still happening in some of these organizations and tracking. I was with a client recently that had just staffed up about 200 people, and their attrition over that first 90 days was 118%.
Mhm.
And so you kind of got extremes of that wasn't necessarily a technology problem, but certainly there's a challenge there of what's going on, of why aren't we telling people about the job. And so I think it's a bit of both. I mean, I think talking to organizations that have been in the last 2 months in the throes of whether it's logistics or retail, staffing up for the seasonality, that now they're just, it's been chaos. Gosh, I can't come to this call. I can't do this because I'm just trying to band-aid over challenges. And so while a lot of the tools and processes exist, clearly they haven't been fully optimized and deployed and ready to go, because if we're still living in the state of chaos, it hasn't fixed the problem.
Right. So I think you know this. I'm a mentor to a lot of these HR technology companies,
Mhm.
and I'm an advisor and board member. And I'm currently a CMO at a company called Connect, which is it's a for hourly hiring. It's a self-standing CRM and ATS, and or bolts onto the front of a bigger system for enterprise. But I hear a lot when I'm talking to customers about you know you're doing all these things. Why don't you just consolidate?
Mhm.
All these different disparate pieces of technology, and the answer sometimes is, "Well, we don't want another place to log into." I'm like, "All right,
Mhm.
you're already logging into SharePoint,
Yeah.
spreadsheets, Jot forms.
Mhm.
You're logging into 100 things. Why don't you consolidate to one or two things to make things
Mhm.
easier?" And the hesitation, I don't think it's about money, because certainly it's cheaper to consolidate.
Yeah.
It's just change management, right?
Mhm. And it's having, especially I think thinking about it right now, and maybe it's for those of you that are in that experience of like, writing down what your chaos is right now. And maybe you aren't even on here live because actually you're dealing with chaos right now, but you're watching this afterwards. But it's writing down what are the chaotic points, what are the challenges, so that then you can take the time in February or in March or, in the time that maybe it's still busy, but it's not as chaotic. But a lot of times you've been through that and then you go off into the holidays and you're like, okay, I can get through that. And you kind of forget about the pain.
Right.
So it's thinking about that pain right now, writing it down, thinking about what you can do about it. Maybe you're not solving it right now, but when you come out of your busy season, then solving for it and then kind of reliving what that pain was to be able to fix it. But I think you're right. I think it's a change. I think it's also sometimes maybe the technology has been procured or has been put in, whether that's one solution that's going across or whether that's multiple, but we haven't adjusted the roles and we haven't adjusted the ways of working. And
Okay.
so we've went through a technology change, but we haven't went through a who's going to do what, how it's going to work, what's that process going to be. And maybe there's hesitation on that because a lot of times that's even harder. And then it's, well, the technology isn't working, but actually it's because you didn't put all of the rest of the changes in place.
That's right. So you said a couple of really interesting things there. So first of all, assess your situation, make that list, check it twice.
Oh, got the holiday fun in there.
Right. My one of my other jobs with Talent Net Media, right, is we audit that hiring process. And
Mhm.
so walk through your own job application and see how it goes. I mean, that's a really good way to start. But then on your side, if you're trying to respond to yourself as the applicant, what are all the different pieces of chaos that you have to touch in order to make that happen? That's a good call out right there.
And
And
having
then,
conversations too about
oh
go
yeah,
talk to those managers. What's stressing you out about hiring?
that's right.
Let's talk to your current staff. Why do you come back for these seasonal roles? Put that on the
Yeah,
list too.
yeah, and so right, the employee interview, the candidate interview. If you can talk to people who have applied and didn't take the role or for whatever reason, that's always great. And the candies are a great way to do that, to survey your
Mm,
your applicant population. Um, but then also, yeah, so we buy technology, we install technology, and then several things happen or don't happen. One, we have turnover, right? So
mm.
you're inheriting some technology that the last person implemented,
Yeah.
and then there's also turnover at the vendor. And so nobody knows what was promised and what's going on because nobody reads contracts, for one thing. And
Mhm.
the contracts aren't really inclusive of what was really promised most of the time. And so there's an email chain that's lost somewhere, probably. And so there's not a person, there's not an operations person in most organizations looking after something like that, keeping the thread all together.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think a lot of times too, even if they're going back to the contract, it's more about how many workflows did I get? How many fields did I get? What's my, uptime, those types of things versus it being about any sort of outcome. And so, a lot of that knowledge may have existed in the person that made the business case in the first place for the technology and what outcomes they were trying to drive. But a lot of times that's either not written down or it's written down and maybe has lost the context of what the story was around it. I mean, I think so frequent, the project charter or like some of those traditional things will come up, um, but they aren't necessarily then measured later. Like, let's go back and see what actually happened, and did we drive the outcomes that we needed to drive? Did we make the adjustments that we needed to adjust? And most likely the answer is we haven't, but
That's right.
you never know.
Yeah. So yeah, having that retrospective approach is a best practice, of course. And sometimes I find that it's sort of just checking boxes, but if you're doing it with intent to improve, that's great, and not just to berate your vendors.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, great.
So yeah, you emphasize a lot, having empathy in the hiring
Mm,
process. I wrote a book about it, right? Hiring humans.
yeah.
So what do you feel are, the easiest kind of low hanging fruit to have empathy in that process for candidates?
Yeah, I think there's a few different places, and it probably goes back to what what roles are going to sit within that experience from a hiring side. So maybe if I kind of just think about this top down, first I think about having digital experience. I call them either orchestrators or analysts or individuals that are thinking about what's that experience going to look like? What are the interactions? What content is going to go in to these systems? And it's not that you're writing every piece down with AI. A lot of the AI can be, you know, the large language models and the conversational interfaces can pull those out, but you still need to start with a basis of what do you want that experience to look like? What touch points do you want? And you can bring empathy into those conversations. It doesn't need to be a recruiter doing that, but the AI can pull empathy in and actually have some feeling to it when you're having a conversation. Um, it's kind of the first piece. So I think about the digital experience of those orchestrators needing to make sure is the right content in there so that you can feel empathy from a tech perspective. And that's sort of like foundational if you've got the right tools in. The next place I think about kind of have empathy in, it would be more of what you might consider like experience agents, which are those individuals that are ensuring candidates don't slip through the cracks, they're not getting stuck, that you have off ramps similar to customer service that I think about when I'm in a consumer life, when I'm getting either frustrated that I've gone back and forth over chat or I filled out the right forms, and now I'm actually just looking for someone to help me. I think about this a lot when I use the Delta app, and frequently more than anything, I'll use the app, but then I'm trying to get on standby and I don't see the option in the app, or I need, some type of support with a flight change or something. And many times I was thinking about I was in the Atlanta airport and I'm trying to get in standby. For some reason, the app didn't have it. I message over the Delta conversational interface. I put my phone in to go through security, it come back the other side. And actually, it's almost been sorted by the time I've gotten through that security because then someone stepped into that process
That's right.
and had empathy to say, like, great, now you're going to be at gate A24 and you'll be on standby. Your CO assignment will come up if you're cleared. You get there. And that experience right there, that was someone having empathy in the way they communicated with me to that point. And that can be brought in where I tried to do the self-service, I tried to use the technology, but now someone just needed to step in because I needed an off ramp to be able to get the support. And then I felt really great about it because there I am standing waiting to board and get cleared and get onto that flight. And I felt like it was a great experience and someone had helped me in that experience.
Yeah, I was surprised. So Delta did a really good job of this, right? They've done a good job of a
Did.
lot of things recently,
Hmm.
interesting things, and American is starting to follow suit. And that's so I'm in DFW, so that's my deal. So, and
Yeah.
the first time I tried that chat within the app on my phone, rather than calling the service desk, right, the
Hmm.
frequent flyer desk, I was surprised that it actually worked. Like something really happened. It was like
Yeah.
there's a real
Yeah.
person here. This is great.
I've even used like multimode. I think I was in Venice earlier this year and was having some problems with the flight, and I'm calling the line and
Mhm.
a line that's priority line, and using the chat at the same time. It actually got resolved over chat faster than
Right.
it did on the phone. And I was like, this is amazing. And
Yeah, and why is I mean, look, AI has been around for a long time, and this isn't really AI. This is just
yeah,
routing and
it
and
is.
and
Yeah, just
sorting.
automation.
And why that I think I wrote my first article about AI in 2014
Yeah.
in automation, and I implemented the first Paradox chatbot in 2015 or 16. And I, I I don't know why we're just. I mean, it's just been within the last year that you can do this. I think this
Mhm.
year, really, that you can have these conversations through an airlines app, and I think it took some of the customer frustration with airlines and prices and things like that in order to get
Mhm.
here. And so occasionally I would say that, you know, customer success leads to better outcomes in all areas of the organization. So
Yeah.
I've always thought that a good candidate experience should be on par with a good customer experience.
Hmm.
And we're really slow to catch up there.
Yeah, I feel like we've been talking about it for so long, to your point, probably 10 years,
Yeah.
but actually making it happen, it's still like it's just now really happening in some cases, and it's still not happening consistently. So it feels like something we've talked about for so long, but it's not actual getting it to materialize is harder, I think, than some people realize to actually go through that experience and build it. Because now the tech does exist. It's more about how, again, kind of coming back to how you're feeding it, how you're setting it up, what content you're putting in. Um,
So, and I think a lot of people listening might say, "I just don't have the people for that. Who's my
mhm,
admin for that? I would want to rely on the vendor for that or something." And that's where, for certainly for medium-sized and larger organizations, a good RPO partner might come in handy,
mhm.
for instance.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of directionally where we're going with our solutions. It's not about, just providing individuals that are, really capable to do some of the traditional hiring steps and processes, but we're looking at those orchestrators, those experienced designers, those experienced agents or off ramp, if you will, individuals,
Mhm.
individuals that are doing more insights or kind of success managers. To your point, where they're measuring sentiment, they're developing action plans for how should I change some of those tools? How should I change some of the experiences? And they're putting together a plan for that. And so that's kind of in new RPO land. It's not about just the coordinators, administrators that are really important, but some of those tasks can change. And so therefore, it's that orchestration. It's you're still having recruiters or customer success to some degree because at the end of the day, we all are craving some type of touch point. You want to know when I show up on day one, you've talked to someone that has given that confidence, that has made you want to join. And so it's providing those individuals, but not doing traditional changing statuses in an ATS, but rather it's having human to human interaction and having those consultative conversations that maybe take that person over the line to say, yeah, I want to join the organization, or that manager that feels really comfortable that you've taken that lift off of them. And so that's kind of in the future, that's what RPO, or even now, that's what RPO looks like now versus some of the traditional hiring models.
Yeah, so RPO has evolved and has been evolving, I guess,
Hmm.
from just where your outsourced recruiting team to where your outsourced, operations team,
Yeah.
which I love. And sort of speaking of which, I guess AMS has started to implement some automation of its own.
Yeah.
And so, can you talk at all about some of the tech things that are happening with AMS?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think certain sectors have different sort of appetite for automation and AI enablement. And for us, we're kind of thinking about it multi kind of faceted. I think the first piece is being able to have the right data to provide those insights and make those decisions. So having data around not just steps in the process and time in process and those types of things that lead to your traditional outcomes, but also having technology and some of the things we do are leveraging technology to manage things like sentiment and understand what's happening at every stage and then actioning it based on it. For being able to provide benchmarking so that organizations know how they're performing against their competitors and not just their competitors from the business or consumer side, but their competitors from a talent perspective. And so a lot of our investments in technology are around being able to get the right data and being able to then serve that back in a very instantaneous way to our clients so they know where do they stand, what's happening right now, how, whether it's labor hours saved or it's outcomes that have been driven or how their candidates are feeling, that they have that real time access to be able to understand that. So that's one area, certainly that we've been investing quite a bit on is really the insights and the analytics and that benchmarking capability. The other side, oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was gonna say the other side would be more leveraging the right technologies and tools to be able to really personalize workflows and touch points. And so a lot of this comes through partnering with the really great tech providers out there that they're focused on the technology and building the right tools and enabling some of that configurability. And then we are looking at, or we're providing that how does it actually operationalize? What are those decisions you need to make around the configurations? What are those touch points? Programmatic led, everything from programmatic led campaigns to, voice-based AI screening, if that's a direction that someone wants to go, to text-based screening and scheduling and offer management, but leveraging the great partners and the great technologies on the market that have built that and focused on that. And so we're bringing in kind of the ability to be the overlay around getting the most out of those tools.
So I always liked having an arsenal or a tool belt
Yeah.
for customers that say things like, "What's new? I want cutting edge. I want to be different. How do I become the employer of choice over my competitor?" And you and I both know that competitors for talent aren't always who you might think they are, right?
Mhm.
I mean, almost everyone's competing with Home Depot, for instance, right?
Yeah.
But that might not be in your vertical list of competitors, but it's certainly you're competing. And a fun thing is that AMS is now partnered with Connect, who I'm doing work with, as one of those tools. But the ability to have the operational knowledge and the technical knowledge within the RPO partner
Mhm.
to know and to have seen what's new, what's interesting, and what fits for this specific situation, because it's not a one size fits all deal,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you got to be able to customize that solution.
Yeah, we've spent a lot on investing in AMS Verified, where, to your point, Connect and others are in that network and in that solution that you're essentially able to know what features exist, how does it work, what are the case studies, what are the integration capabilities, where has it been done elsewhere. And so that's been a huge benefit to our clients to be able to very quickly understand who competes in the market, how does it actually work, who else is using it, what do my other comparative or other TA leaders say about those different tools. And to your point, it's not a one size fits all, and what's going to work for one organization and their tech stack is going to look very different for another organization, even if they're hiring the same type of roles or the same type of people or in the same location. Just their natural environment of, are they a sweet shop, or are they a kind of specialist technology TA shop, and being able to put together the right ecosystem. And so our investment in technology has been investing in a platform to be able to house and understand everything that's happening in the market, have a point of view, be able to enable our customers with that knowledge so that they can build the right tech stack, so that we can enable the right tools, we can identify if there's gaps in that ecosystem that need to be filled with other different technologies or expansion of existing technologies. But you're right, it's I frequently get asked, well, what's the best tech stack? Well, that's
Let
a
me ask
million
you a
dollar,
bunch of
yeah.
questions first.
Yeah. I don't want to give you it's the consultant it depends answer, but that's actually where we need to start.
It's true. It's all true. We're going to talk about that. I think on stage, hopefully with you in Austin on March 7th at the next TalentNet Live conference. And registration will be open for that later today. If you're watching this at a different time, then it's probably already open at talenttexas.com. And we are appreciative of AMS for being a great partner with us for the last couple of years, and we're excited to do more. But let's go back to taking a human-centric approach.
Mhm.
How can hiring managers and recruiters even attempt to have a human-centric approach in the busy volume days of holiday hiring?
Yeah. I think it first starts with having the right planning. So thinking about it up front, thinking about it ahead of time. And I appreciate we're in December and you might be in the middle of chaos right now and you're going, well, yeah, that's past. But
Oh, it's
and
coming right back up
preparation,
though, right?
yeah,
Spring will be
it
here in no
is.
time. Yeah.
Yeah. And preparation for, and especially if you're, maybe you're in kind of manufacturing or consumer or food and bev, where you're prepping for Super Bowl, you're prepping for Memorial Day or others. So appreciate seasonality doesn't exist just around the holidays, but it's first planning for that and understanding what are those pain points, what are the opportunities, and outlining what do you want that experience to feel like? I mean, I always think about in a very simplistic way, which is, do I want a fully tech-led approach where it's almost all digital and there's very little human interaction? Me personally, I would say no. I think there's a place for technology, but it's not all tech. But I think
Don't
about
want
that as like one extreme.
automation overload, right?
Yep. I then think about maybe I want more of a balanced tech and people approach where, I'm looking at really ensuring the technology is optimized, but I still have, let's say 2 human touch points in that experience. Or do I want kind of the third, like where I want it really to be? I want it to white glove. I want tech enablement to automate the really mundane, boring tasks, but I'm still going to have touch points with managers, touch points with candidates that might exist 4 or 5 times in the process. So I first think about where do I want to be? What's my strategic choice around that? Of those kind of 3 options, and you could say there's 5 options, you could say there's 7, but what extreme of that experience, what side do I want to be on? Then I think about what are those touch points? Where is it really going to make a difference so that I can be empathetic, so I can be kind during that process? And where is it going to matter? Does it really matter that I'm having a conversation up front before application? In volume, not so much, as long as you have the right brand and content and the right programmatic running. But where it might matter is, I've went through the experience, it's 2 minutes and I've been screened, I've been scheduled, and I'm coming in tomorrow to meet with you, Craig. I might want a quick touch point to ensure that that person understands I'm going to be meeting Craig. This is where I'm going to meeting them at. This is the brand kind of ethos, and kind of that reiteration that getting to make sure that I'm going to show up and that I feel like I've now connected with the person. So you're doing a bit of a pep talk. You're doing a bit of a, ensuring that person really feels comfortable and is excited about the opportunity versus a traditional screen. So that's one place I think you can bring empathy in and making sure that, that individual feels comfortable coming in. Maybe it's someone that's going to the first job they've never interviewed. It can be super nerve-wracking. I think sometimes we forget about that.
Right.
Um, or it could be, this is life-changing because it's 75 cents more an hour, and that's going to enable me to do, this in my life, or it's going to enable me to get the next apartment, or, put food on the table for my family. And so that touch point sort of prior to interview, I think is always a good spot to bring in some empathy, just a quick 10-minute chat to make sure that the person understands what they're coming into. And then I think after that, if you've been selected for the role, if I could pick 2 touch points of where I put it in for a candidate, the other touch point is, at that offer stage or post-offer stage to, you're going through the background, going through prelim, what do I expect on day one? And what's that going to look like? And that can help the manager, it can help that individual. You can make sure that they're ready for the job and that they've thought about scheduling. Sometimes these individuals are picking up 2 or 3 jobs at one time and need to consider those types of things in that conversation leading up to the start. So I think there's some really critical touch points because at the end of the day, even if you go through multiple jobs in a year or every couple years, it is a big decision and it does impact day to day and how a person is living. And I think it's important to have a couple touch points in there. So it's, you can really resonate and feel that connectivity.
So you mentioned that there could be multiple variations of this, right? And I think understanding how and when you've got it right is tricky. You
It is.
talk about feedback loops.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's discuss, how can employers and recruiters enable, good feedback about when you've gotten it right? What's working, what's not?
Yeah. I think a lot of times and I could say the collective we, but don't always go and talk to these employees if they might be seasonal workers and they're only in for 30 days or 60 days. And, getting that feedback, you need to really take that into account, either have conversations, or if you're doing it in mass, you can be through technology, it can be through SMS, it can be through surveys. If you don't necessarily always have to have a one-on-one conversation, but you need to get that feedback. What is it actually like in the job? what were some of the pain points? Did you prefer a set schedule? Did you prefer a flex schedule? Did you, you were you frustrated that you couldn't pick up a shift at the restaurant that's a mile down the road? Was your manager not present because they were too busy, dealing with issues all the time or supply chain issues or other things? But understanding that voice of those frontline workers, I think, is critical because that's going to allow you to then understand what do I need to be telling people, the expectations of the role. It also allows to be able to make changes. They don't have to be massive changes. They can be incremental. Maybe it's going from paid once a week to paid every day, and maybe that's probably not a small change, but that's a change that could be considered versus, maybe it's just they want, a place to be able to take my break that I can sit down in the back, and that hasn't been considered. And so you have your break and you're standing out back of the restaurant when a small change is putting a table and chairs in the back. And I know that sounds really basic, but these things are really important for individuals that might be on their feet for 8 hours a day working in these types of environments. So going a bit of a tangent there, but I think it's, really understanding that experience from those workers to know what are the challenges, what do I need to know, how can I make changes so that you can have greater retention, so that you can have happier employees. And so I think it's really important to do that, and it's also important to do that same thing for frontline managers. A lot of times we don't necessarily we promote someone they've never managed. I think we're, as knowledge workers and as corporate employees, we get a lot more development of leadership and management than what you do in these frontline roles, and you're just sort of put into a manager role and then expected to develop team members when you've never done that.
Yeah. So, I mean, yes, most managers aren't trained to be managers.
Mhm.
They're in that job because they were good at their old job, so they really don't know anything about hiring or managing. They think they do, but
Yeah.
we don't give very good training for that. But you're you make a really good point about making people feel valued,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
and I think very often we find one solution that worked, made people feel valued this one time, and then we kind of forget about it for a while. And so
Mhm.
there's a thing that I refer to as empathy burnout.
Yeah.
How can how can hiring professionals sustain genuine empathy with some of the high pressure deadlines that they've got to deal with?
Yeah. I think it's determining and prioritizing what either giving yourself a structure of when you're going to get that different feedback and how you're going to sort of refresh your thinking. Is sometimes I think about even just how do I recognize people? How do people want getting those inputs? And being able to either do that on a frequent basis or think about new ways to bring in that empathy or bringing in that touch point so it doesn't get boring. It doesn't feel like now I'm just checking another box or doing another step, because then it's not going to be genuine either for the candidate. It's not going to be genuine for the manager. I think the other thing is actually going out if you're talking about maybe recruiters or kind of those orchestrators that are going through that building that experience. Go spend time in that job. Go spend time on the floor at the store. Go spend time in those hotels. Your point around Ross, my point around that my experience over the weekend at a store, a lot of times that almost re-energizes or refreshes you too to go back and relate to what's actually happening. So if it's a bit of a burnout, maybe once a month, maybe every other week, depending on the kind of logistics of it, go into that store, go into that restaurant. And a lot of times that will be enough to refresh, or having that connectivity with an owner operator, if you're talking franchise, or with a manager, that it gives you that inspiration again to feel again that I can create that connectivity and create that empathy. I mean, I think it's a lot of almost using the human to human contact to be your re-enter kind of that re-energy
Hmm.
energization. Can't even say the word. But get re-energized to feel like you can represent and bring that empathy in again. Because I think that's how we get energy, is kind of human to human interaction.
So it's funny. If you're going to do that, if you're going to go out in the field you hiring managers or recruiters or employer brand people or whoever you are,
Mhm.
consultants, RPO partners, bring some credentials
Yes.
because
Yeah.
people at retail establishments are
Yeah.
are circumspect.
Yeah.
So when I would go to these Ross stores, I'd be like, I'm working with the corporate office to help improve
Mhm.
hiring and help you, have some better tools and things like that. And they'd be like, "Who are you again?
Yeah.
You can call this person if you need to.
Yeah.
You don't have to talk to me. I'm out here trying to spread goodwill and figure things out."
Mhm.
But having a business card helped very much, and it'd be like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
so
Well, and it's also maybe like having the conversation with the regional lead or the manager ahead of time that this individual is going to be coming in, and they can set the table with the team and then do some work potentially if they're okay with it.
yes, and
Yeah.
yes, that helps. But also, I would have never known about the experience of walking in to apply to a job and nobody's there to
True.
take your application.
True.
And so
Yeah, that's true.
this the secret shopper effect is great, but you might get thrown out also.
Yeah. And it probably depends on too, what's your purpose in going? Is it to connect with someone? Is it to your point, kind of do the secret shopper to see what the experience is and have the authentic experience? So think about
Right.
what you're going for in that situation.
All right. So if great hiring was a holiday sweater, what would it look like?
Oh, I think would have some sparkle to bring that kind of touch or that excitement. So definitely would have some sparkle in. It would be fun. So maybe a bit of sarcastic, whether that's, you fancy the Grinch, you fancy Home Alone, or
Mhm.
whatever it might be, a bit of maybe some sarcasm and fun in there. Maybe not as much sarcasm, but a bit more fun into that sweater, a bit of sparkle to to be able to bring that fun into hiring, bring that kind of reality in, having a little fun or a little flair to it, and not over representing. So you don't want so much sparkle that then you land in the job and there's no sparkle at all. But I think it's having a bit of that sparkle and a little bit of fun.
So I love that you say that. I think that's right. I was going to say smooth, but I think sparkle and fun is better. Um,
Smooth is good too. So I think that's the pragmatic.
I've really enjoyed Target stores are doing some ad campaigns that are holiday snarky, and I think those are really fun. So I agree with that. A little bit of self awareness
Hmm.
and and empathy, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's how do you have an empathetic sweater?
And don't know. Yeah, that's a good point.
All right, we're gonna have to work on that. We'll collaborate on the next article.
I'll be looking tomorrow. We have our AMS in our Cleveland office tomorrow. We have our holiday party, and it's holiday sweaters and white elephant, all of that. So I'm going to be now checking everyone's sweaters and outfits out to see if I've got anything that maybe could represent empathy in a holiday
Human
sweater.
kindness. Yeah, something
Yeah.
like that. That's great. I love it. All right. Well, Annie, it's been fantastic talking to you today about this. To all of you who joined in or will join in, reach out to us with questions and
Yeah.
comments and suggestions. We'll probably do this again and tell us what you'd like to hear about next time. And happy holidays, everyone. And here's
Thank you
to a
all.
great 2025. That's right.
Definitely. Thanks, Greg. See you later.
Thanks, Annie.
Bye.